2 weeks ago, we looked at who he was going to be, and there was the virgin birth and so many other things. Then that was 3 weeks ago. And then 2 weeks ago, we looked at what he would accomplish, right? And then last week, we looked at when he would come. So far, everything seems to fit Jesus. And so today, it's the easiest question. When a journalist comes, does a story, you're supposed to ask who, what, when, where, and why, right? Well, we've done the who, the what, the when. We're not going to do the why, but we're going to do where. So we're going to do where this morning. That's the easiest question to answer. So let's take a look and see how it happened. When you look at where, this also is what transpired in the New Testament, because these guys, strangers, suddenly showed up in town. Remember these guys? The three wise men? And they come from, we talked about this before earlier, they come from part of the Mesopotamia Valley that is common to where Daniel was exiled when they hauled away, 5 centuries before Jesus. So these guys come from an area that could very well have had inside information about the coming of the Messiah, because Daniel was in the Mesopotamian Valley. There's no record of him ever going home to Israel. Could be he stayed there the whole time. So he left behind probably information about the coming of this Messiah. And these guys were smart enough to be able to put two and two together. They looked at the stars largely, and they figured out that a king was born in Israel. So they decided that this is such a big deal because it's written in the stars in the sky, we better go find this guy. So what do? They come into town, and Matthew 2 is where we pick up the story. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men came from the east, came to Jerusalem. By the way, I want to underscore Herod the king. That's important to remember for a second here, okay? And then they find the king, they find Herod, and they say in verse 2 of Matthew 2, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. So their question is our question today, right? And they didn't have to do too much crazy talk to figure out where this one was going to come from. By the way, what was their title for this one who was born? King of the Jews. Exactly the same thing that was printed above Jesus' head at the crucifixion. King of the Jews. Where is this one King of the Jews? Now, apparently, Herod didn't know, which makes sense. We've come to worship him. So it goes on, verse 3. When Herod the king, see the conflict coming up? Heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So why would he be troubled? Herod the king hears about the birth of the king of the Jews. So suddenly we are, if you're a king in ancient times, your entire business is about eradicating all your competition. Because if your competition can get up ahead of steam from popularity from the people and from the military and stuff like that, you can have a coup. So you have to eliminate all these competitors as soon as possible before they gather power. So here, Herod hears that his competition has been born. The best time to get rid of the competition is when it has the least amount of power, which is right now. So he hears a baby's been born, and everyone's troubled. Now, why? Another question. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem was troubled. Why would Jerusalem be troubled? Isn't this the birth of their king? Not when you got Herod. Exactly, not when you got Herod. When you have a man like this who is going to wreak havoc for his own personal gain, he could actually do something as unthinkable as murder all the potential competitor children if you can identify them. And we know that exactly happened. So this is why terror came upon the entire town. Suddenly, these guys from the east who have good inside knowledge that the king of the Jews has been born have gone to the wrong place first. They've gone to Herod. And now Herod, the king, feels threatened. And all of Jerusalem feels like, oh my gosh, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. And sure enough, it was a bloodbath because the little boys were killed all through the region. So he doesn't know. So assembling all the chief priests, so the religious leaders, and the scribes of the people, again, religious leaders. The scribes, in fact, were the ones who were the most expert on the written law. He inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born, and without hesitation, they quoted for him what was written in Micah 7 centuries before, Micah 5:2, very, very clear. But you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, that's the old, what do you want to call that? Kind of the traditional name for Bethlehem is Ephratah. Oh, in fact, there was a second Bethlehem up in north, too. So it kind of distinguishes between the Bethlehems. So, oh, you Bethlehem Ephratah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. I mean, you're just nothing. From you shall come forth for me, this is God speaking, for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old, from ancient days. Now, soak this up for a second. This is a king is going to be born, a ruler, and this is a ruler appointed for God. It says ruler for me. So this is God's doing. This is not this is not like Alexander the Great. This is a ruler who is going to come forth for me. He will rule Israel, and that last two lines are just stunning. Look at that. His coming forth is from old, from ancient days. So this king that's coming has been foretold for ages. Now, when a Jew thinks, who is the king that's been foretold for ages to come, they would automatically think the Messiah. Automatically. This is the one whose rule would never cease, and he is coming out of Bethlehem. Now, Bethlehem, that's the answer. So we can quit right now. Comes from Bethlehem. But interestingly enough, this was very well known, not just to the religious leaders of the time, but the common folk at the time too. In fact, Jesus came up with a conflict in his ministry because of this. Do you remember this? It was in John. Let me read this for you. This is pretty cool. The people knew too. If you go to John 7, Jesus is in the middle of his ministry, the middle of his 3 years of public ministry. And an amazing thing happened earlier in chapter 7. But the people suddenly say, when they heard these words, some of the people said, well, this really is the prophet, the prophet. Now, when they say the prophet, they normally mean Elijah. Because in another place in the Old Testament, it says that before the Messiah comes, Elijah will precede him, right? And to this very day, if you get invited to a Passover meal, it's at a Jewish person's home, part of the Passover meal, they will do stuff awaiting Elijah. And part of the Seder meal you'll have is you'll let the little kids run to the front door of the house and fling open the door and wait for Elijah to come in. Because Elijah comes before the Messiah. And if he does happen to come in the door, he'll actually have a place setting at the table because they set a place setting for Elijah. That's how much they know Elijah comes. So they're saying right here in John 7, well, maybe this is Elijah. This really is the prophet. Others said, no, this is the Messiah. A better guess. But some said, well, is the Messiah to come from Galilee? Has not the scripture said that the Messiah comes from the offspring of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David was? I've heard biblical skeptics say, well, look, here it admits that Jesus was not born in Bethlehem. No, that's not what it's saying. What it's saying is that the people who are arguing about whether this can be the Messiah or not, they knew, as well as the religious leaders, that the Messiah had to be born in Bethlehem. And as far as they were concerned, Jesus, as he's ministering, came from Galilee. Galilee's way over there. Bethlehem's way over here. They're separated by a couple hundred miles. So the people in this dispute about could this be Elijah or the Messiah, in their ignorance say it can't be the Messiah because this guy was not born in Bethlehem. But they didn't know that he was. Because remember in the story, as we go past the birth, he's born in Bethlehem. He's there just for a short amount of time. Maybe, we don't really know exactly how long, but long enough for Mary and Joseph to be living in a house instead of, being in the manger. And then they move shortly after. They go down to Egypt and back, and then they're up in the north. They go up to Galilee. So from the time that Jesus is a very small child, his life is in Galilee. And as far as anyone knows, he was born there. But he was not born there. He was born in Bethlehem. Very important. So there was a division among the people over this common fact that he had to be born in Bethlehem. Let me show you a picture of Bethlehem. There's Bethlehem when we visited it in 2007, some of us. In fact, there's Scott. Scott's right there against the wall. He just took a picture. But this in the background, that's Bethlehem. On the top of this ridge, that's Bethlehem today. This is our tour group. There's my daughter Rebecca. There's Dorothy. I don't know who else is on there. That's right. So let me talk about that for a second. But this is Bethlehem. It's on a ridge, and there's a ridge that goes north and south through Israel, and all the important places you know about are on that ridge. Jerusalem is 5 miles to the right of this picture on the ridge, just 5 miles. So Bethlehem and Jerusalem are 5 miles apart, 5.5 miles, on top of this ridge. You can't quite see it. If I had panned the camera over to about here, you might be able to see it, but it's 5 miles off to the right. Bethlehem today is on the top of a hill, and the larger area around Bethlehem is still considered Bethlehem because of the sheep. When they graze the sheep, they graze them all over these hills right here. So that's why I especially love this, because all these hills you see right here, Those are all grazing areas for sheep. If it's too steep to grow barley, you graze sheep. But there was also a huge barley growing area there. Now, what I want to just take like 5 minutes to clue you into is that when we say that the Messiah was born in Bethlehem, which is true and it was prophesied, we don't understand that Bethlehem had a reputation at the time. So with God picking Bethlehem, he was actually making a statement to us about him being born in Bethlehem. There's a reason it has to be Bethlehem, and there's also kind of a reputation it has. For instance, can you name for me what city in the United States is identified with automobiles? Detroit, exactly. Can you name for me the small village in Israel that is associated with love lost and love found? Bethlehem. What? Yes, Bethlehem, because of its history. It had a long history. In fact, when I talk about love lost, if you go way back, Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob, Jacob had 12 sons. Jacob was really stuck on Rachel to marry her. He gets hornswoggled by Rachel's dad. He has to marry the oldest daughter, Leah, instead, but then he eventually marries Rachel, and Rachel is his love of his entire life. Jacob then has 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. The very last two sons, which are the next to last one is Joseph, remember that? And the last one is Benjamin. In childbirth, as Rachel is giving birth to Benjamin, the love of Jacob's life, Rachel dies in childbirth with Benjamin, the 12th and last son. They happen to be moving around at the time. They're sojourning in a way. They're not living in the area, but they find themselves, Rachel has Benjamin, the 12th, on the road in the middle of nowhere in Nowhere's land, and that Nowhere's land at the time was called Ephratah, Bethlehem. To this very day, if you go to Israel and you go into Bethlehem, you can go to Rachel's tomb. So Rachel was born there. Now this is the deepest love of Jacob's life, Rachel. He just loved her almost to an idol level. He loved her, but he loved her tremendously and lost her there in Bethlehem. Then go fast forward about, several centuries, and you get to one of the best love stories in the entire Bible. Do you know this story? Because it takes place in this place. If I zoom in on this same place, you see that we're actually down here, this hard rock that's all weathered. We're standing on a threshing floor when I took this picture. And this threshing floor is still considered to be part of Bethlehem. A threshing floor was really necessary. When you harvested your barley, what you had to do is you had to separate the chaff from the outside of the barley from the barley itself, right? And when you see Jesus walking through fields with the apostles and they're picking wheat and stuff like that, if you've ever done this before, you pick the wheat or the barley, you put it in your hand and you rub it together. And when you rub it together, all this chaff comes off of it. You don't want to eat that. That's like the hulls on the outside of popcorn, right? You got to rub that chaff off. And what they would normally do by hand is you'd rub it, put it in your hand, and just blow like this, and the chaff would come off, and the wheat or the barley would stay here. Well, you can't do this for the whole harvest. Can't do that. So a better way to do it is still to blow it away. What you do is you take a big pile of this barley and you chuck it up in the air, whoof, like this. And as it falls down, the heavier barley corns come straight down. And if there's just a slight breeze, it blows the chaff off sideways, and what falls on the ground is barley. Very simple. So when you're there, you just keep chucking the stuff in the air when there's blowing. But you don't want to do this on dirty ground. Why? Because your food is dropping into the dirt. When you collect it up, you just put it. So what would be really nice is to have a concrete slab. Well, they didn't have concrete. So the next best thing is a rock outcropping on the top of a hill that's smooth. And that would be a threshing floor. So you'd take your barley at the end of the season when you harvested it, you'd bring it up to this threshing floor, and you would chuck it in the air, hoping the wind would blow the chaff away. And then the good food, the barley and the wheat, would fall down on this smooth stone, and then you collect it up together, and that'd be your harvest. There are very few threshing floors in Israel. There's two very famous ones. This is one of two in Bethlehem, and it may be in the center of the story that comes up in a second here. There's only two in Bethlehem, and there's one in Jerusalem. And you know where the one in Jerusalem is? It was right at the center of the temple. Because we find, yeah, I know, this is crazy. When David goes and finds a piece of real estate to build the temple, he goes to a threshing floor. in the middle of Jerusalem. It's on the top of a hill, and there's exposed, smooth rock. And for everyone who would harvest in Jerusalem, they'd go to this smooth stone right on the top of this hill, and they built the temple over that, and the Holy of Holies right on top of that, on the threshing floor. Now, to this very day, again, if you're a tourist, if you go to Israel and you get a chance to go into where the Islamic section is, where the Dome of the Rock is and stuff like that, the Dome of the Rock, number 2 in all Islam in terms of important places. The Dome of the Rock is built right smack dab on the place where the temple was. And if you get a chance to go inside the Dome of the Rock, it's named Dome of the Rock because inside there's exposed rock. That's the threshing floor. It's a threshing floor. So go back to Bethlehem now. Bethlehem has 2 threshing areas. This is one of them, the most prominent one, and could very well be the one in this story. The story of Ruth happens before the first king of Israel comes about. It's during the horrible time of the judges. Horrible. Where all through the entire book, it's just horribly bad thing after horribly bad thing after horribly bad thing. There is no real government that's there. And it says over and over again, they did what was right in their own eyes. And it was horrible. It was horrible. But in the middle of that story, there is the story of Ruth. Now I'll just give you the nickel tour of Ruth because we need that to find out about why we find love found, in why that is the overarching thought of Bethlehem. Naomi is a woman who's married to a man, Elimelech, and they live in Bethlehem. There's a famine, and so they decide to go looking for food somewhere else. They go all the way out of Israel, across on the other side of the Dead Sea to Moab, and they take their 2 sons. So it's Naomi and her husband and her 2 sons. The 4 of them go out there. Once they get out there, the 2 sons, of course, marry, and they marry 2 local women, Orpah, not Oprah, Orpah, Orpah and Ruth. And these 2 sons marry these 2 wonderful but foreign women. They are not from Israel. They are foreign Moabites is what it is. And then the worst of all things happens. Naomi's husband dies. The 2 sons die. And now Naomi, the mom, is left with her 2 daughters-in-law. And they have to figure out what to do. They're powerless without men in the family. So Naomi figures the best thing for her to do, since she comes from Israel, is to go back to where she lives, which was Bethlehem. At that time, there's food back in Bethlehem. Now, what does she do with her 2 daughters-in-law? Well, she said to them, you 2 need to stay here because your people are here. And since your people are here, you will find a future here because they will take care of you. You can't come with me because if you come with me, you'll be a foreigner and you'll have nothing. So Orpah, which actually the name is roughly translated as stubborn. I don't know if Oprah knows that, but Orpah decides to stay behind. But Ruth does a phenomenal thing, her love for her mother-in-law, Naomi, is so powerful. She says, and this is just a stunning phrase that if you walk up to any Jew, they could quote this to you. She says to her mother-in-law, I'm going to where you're going to go. There's nothing that's going to stop me. This is Jim's loose translation. And then she says the magic phrase, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Now that's astonishing because when she goes to Israel, she goes back to Bethlehem with Naomi. She has really no legal connection to any good there. She has no family there. She could live destitute there on the streets. You just don't know what's going to happen. So she says, your people will be my people, your God will be my God, which, by the way, is the magic phrase in the Old Testament for the people of God. You will be my people, I will be your God. And she says, I'll be part of that. But she has no assurances. All she's doing is putting her faith in the God of Naomi and of Israel. So they go back to Bethlehem, this place right here. And as they go back to Bethlehem, read the story of Ruth because it's great. But push comes to shove, the story goes on, and then Naomi says to Ruth, there's a man of great honor. His name is Boaz. And he can actually redeem our life, and he can redeem the property we have. And maybe, just maybe, he will come to love you and marry you. Well, there's no reason why he should. She's a Moabite person. She's a foreigner. And foreigners, the goyim, the goy, the nations, were always characterized as being dogs. And God had told the nation of Israel, watch out for the dogs, watch out for the goyim, watch out for all those Gentiles. They will contaminate what you believe. So technically, he should not marry her. But one day, she goes out and does something that culturally we don't have any connection to. She goes out and she sort of proposes marriage to Boaz. And she does it right here at the threshing floor. While he's threshing grain, whoosh, 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 she goes and basically tells him, I'm available. And she doesn't know what he's going to do. Well, as you read the story, of course, it's a wonderful story. She has no reason why he should look kindly on her. She's from an outside country. There's no other connections. He should despise her and push her away and marry one of his own kinsmen. But instead, what he does is he goes on the attack. He finds out everyone else who might have claim on this land and claim on Naomi. He gives them first shot to kind of do all this, and they all decline and say, no. If you want to take on this family and Ruth and marry her, do it. You can do it. And he does it and marries her. And it's all because she came to him at this threshing floor right here, probably this very same threshing floor, and said, will you marry me, basically? Now, again, there's no reason why he should. It was someone who came with no merit and no worth, who's a foreigner even to the God of Israel. And yet she found grace from God through Boaz. I got to tell you, it's just as an aside. When I get really depressed about how bad things are, culturally and ethically and morally, I read the book of Ruth. Because it's just such a great encouragement about the way things really ought to go. And how a woman who had absolutely no hope at all, except for the fact she said, your people will be my people and your God will be my God, is brought into great grace because of that. So when you talked in Jesus' time about Bethlehem, sure, you think about Jacob losing his great love, Rachel, but you'd more so think about, but it's a wonderful thing about this woman who should never have deserved any grace or good from anyone, and because she placed her faith in God, he brought her in and blessed her greatly. That's what they would think when they think Bethlehem. So when a king is born in Bethlehem, there's a lot about grace for those who do not deserve grace that's thought about in their mind, because Bethlehem is a place of love found when it's undeserved. That's the reputation of Bethlehem. And that's the reputation that falls over the Messiah. Messiah is the one who, like Boaz, will be the one who offers the grace of God to those who don't deserve it, just like Ruth. It's an astonishing story. But there's a little bit more technicality right here. Ruth and Boaz do get married, and they have a son named Obed. He makes a big splash. Naomi, the mother-in-law, actually almost considers him her son. And then Obed has a son named Jesse. That should start to ring some bells. And then Jesse has a son named David. And that's why Bethlehem became acquainted with David. Because Ruth found love in a place where she shouldn't have found love. And then 2 generations later is David, who is the prototype for the Messiah, who will bring gracious love for those who don't deserve it, just like what happened on the threshing floor of Bethlehem. It had a reputation. That's why if anyone says to you, well, Jesus was born just about anywhere, in the Judean hills or in Jerusalem or whatever, you miss the entire central fact of the fact that the Messiah coming from Bethlehem is making the same offer to mankind that Boaz made to the undeserving woman Ruth. And that in the Jewish mind is connected together. Has to be Bethlehem. So here David is born here. This becomes the nation where the King David and his is always related to. Here, let me just illustrate really quickly and we'll quit this. Samuel is looking from God to anoint a new king because Saul's being such a jerk. So the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I'll send you to Jesse, there he is, the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons. And you remember that story. If you go read 1 Samuel 16, and he goes through all the sons of Jesse, and they're there, and they're kind of posing for Samuel, and they're looking fit like kings. And he goes through the entire list, and there's no one that's suitable. And Samuel says, well, I don't understand. Is there somebody else? Well, the little guy. He's out there with the sheep. Well, bring him in. David, anointed king. Another reference to it in Isaiah 11, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of, there it is again, Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Go into verse 10. In that day, the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. So Jesse is always associated with Bethlehem because he's the father of David. One more, Isaiah 9, we read this a couple weeks ago. Of the increase of his government and of peace, there will be no end on the throne of David, Bethlehem, and over his kingdom, to establish it, to uphold it with justice and with righteousness, from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Now, I don't know why Herod didn't know where he was going to be born, because everyone else did. Except Herod was not really an Israelite. He was an Edomite. He was a descendant from, Jacob and Esau. He was a descendant of Esau. So maybe that's why he didn't know. But everyone else knew, and everyone else knew that this one who would come out of Bethlehem would not be an ordinary king. He would be the King of Kings, whose kingdom would never end. Now that should have put some fear in Herod's heart. But all he was worried about was his own silly kingdom. Too little to be among the clans of Judah, as you look out here, and that's another message that God does. Why not have the Messiah born in Jerusalem? That's this, or Hebron down in the south. Those are two cities that are associated with the kingship and power in the center of Israel. But God decides he's going to have the Messiah come from nowhere. Bethlehem is really just a way station for shepherds, is all it is. Nowhere. And that's actually too little among the clans. That's actually God's strategy to kind of confound the wise and the powerful, that from God's perspective, his king will come from a human source that's inconsequential, so that he'll make the powerful crazy with the weak. This is what God does. Yeah, and I think of this is a strange connection, how God confounds the powerful with the weak. When it snows like it is right outside right now, I think about snowflakes. Probably the most fragile thing on the planet is a snowflake. As soon as it hits your arm, you look at it, it goes away, right? Very, very fragile. And yet, God can use such a fragile little thing to absolutely paralyze cities. Think about that, the most fragile thing there is. This is God's sense of humor in a way. He's saying that among mankind, the fragile things, the weak things, will confound the wise and the powerful. And that's partially, too, why he comes out of the sheep station at Bethlehem. And Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 1. God chose what is low and despised of the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God. And that's Bethlehem too. It's a nowhere place where love was found unexpectedly, grace in a barren place for this one who didn't deserve it. And out of this place, from the throne of David, comes a Messiah whose graciousness will be just the same for those who don't deserve it. This whole picture swirls in the head of a Jew when they think about Bethlehem and this great Messiah who will come. For us, it's just part of a cute little story on December 25th. But for the Jews, it's the profound coming of a Messiah connected to David who will bring grace to those who least expect it. That's what a Jew thinks. So it has to be Bethlehem. What I want to do for you is sing a song this morning with Dorothy, and it's a song that she and I have sung for 30 years. And it incorporates the whole idea of Bethlehem, and also parts of Isaiah that we read this morning and previous mornings in the last couple of weeks, and just talks about the fact that Bethlehem is not just the old little town of Bethlehem that we sing on December 25th. It's a place of magically finding the grace of God when it's undeserved, and the rising of an unexpected king. It's a big deal. So I want to sing this for you, and we'll see if we can resurrect this out of our 30-year memory. We used to routinely sing this every Christmas, but I don't think we have here for 10 years, 20, I don't know, maybe ever, I'm not sure.
Been a long time.
Okay.
As for you, Bethlehem, Ephratah, for you are little among Judah. From you shall he come forth to me, who is to be ruler in Israel, and his name shall be called Wonderful, and his name shall be called Mighty God, and he shall rule on
be called Wonderful, and his name shall be called Mighty God, and he shall rule all nations, for he shall be our peace. La 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 la
Then they will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks.
No more shall nation lift sword against nation. They shall not learn to make war anymore. And his name shall be called Wonderful. And his name shall be called Mighty God. And he shall rule all nations, for he shall be our peace, and he shall rule all nations, for he shall be our peace. Oops. Hey,
Are we finished?
we are.
We have one more song to sing. You better stand up. Oh, the wonder, glory awaking heaven in the flesh of a baby. Come, oh, come, bring your heart to the manger. Come, oh, come, we'll start again and see what love has done. Let's start the whole song over because the words are so good. Oh, the wonder. Oh, the wonder, glory awaking heaven in the flesh of a baby. Come, oh, come, bring your heart to the manger. Come, oh, come, and see what love has done. Chains are breaking, burdens are lifted by this one the Father has gifted. Come, oh, come, sings the song of redemption. Come, oh, come, and see what love has done.
what love has done.
Amen. Merry Christmas.